Number 1. The Parking Garage. My scary true story happened about 10 years ago. At the time, I was working double shifts at my job. It was necessary, as the economy had taken quite the downturn. My father had lost his job, and I wanted to help contribute to my family, even though I lived by myself. So when this happened, I had actually been working the double shifts for about 3 months. On this night, I was the last person at the office. I looked at the clock and it was midnight. I decided to go home. I lived in Tokyo, in a very large apartment building. There was a parking garage under the building. Although I had a permit to park there, they did not have assigned spaces. It was first come, first served. Getting home at night, especially late at night, made it harder to find a spot. On this night, I ended up parking very far away from the elevators. The garage was very creepy when it got like this, and I had the distinct feeling, from the moment that I got out of my car, that someone was watching me. I guess I feel this way a whole lot when I am down there, but this time it was much worse. It was much creepier. I also thought that I continued to hear noises, as if someone was creeping along behind the cars. I called out once to see if someone was there, but there was no answer. I guess if someone was following me and had bad intentions, he wouldn't respond anyways. I tried my best to just brush it off. If you've ever been in a parking garage, you may have seen that there are large concrete columns in it. Support columns. As I walked around one aisle, making my way to the elevator, a man suddenly stepped out behind one of the columns. He was rather tall, all dressed in black, and he was wearing a hood and a silver skull mask. I stopped, as I would have to walk by the man to get to the elevator. I asked him if I could help him or something, and he didn't respond. He just looked at me. I made as if to walk past him, and he moved to get in my way. I stepped to the side, and he matched my step. I was very scared. Although I did not see that he had a weapon, he was obviously trying to block me. He hadn't moved towards me yet, however. In fact, he didn't move unless I moved too. But it was obvious that he was trying to block me. After waiting for a while, I realized I shouldn't try to go past the guy. The best idea was to turn around and run to my car. After hesitating for just a moment, I turned and began running as fast as I could. I didn't look back, but I could hear him chasing after me. It was frightening. My heart was beating due to the exercise and due to the fear. I only hoped I could get back to my car before him. I had the remote door locker in my hand, so I was able to unlock the car door before I got to it. When I got to the car, I quickly opened the door, got in, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Nearly immediately afterwards, the man had caught up and grabbed my door handle. When he couldn't open the door, he tried pounding on the car window. I started the car, and when I did, he moved behind the car, obviously trying to block me. I didn't care. I had no problem hitting someone who was trying to hurt me. I shifted and backed out as fast as I could. He jumped out of the way. I drove to the police station and reported the incident. I wasn't aware of this at the time, but there had been a series of attacks on parking garages over the past several months. Several people were stabbed to death. I wasn't able to tell the police much to help them, unfortunately. I hadn't seen his face or anything. I do hope they caught him. And number 2, the hotel room. Originally, the job I worked in was in my hometown. However, about 8 months before this story happened, I was transferred to the home office in Tokyo. This really isn't unusual, though. It was difficult to be away from my family, and it was difficult staying in a small hotel room. The walls in the hotel room I was staying in were really thin. 2 weeks before this happened, a new neighbor moved into the room beside me. When I got home from work, I could always hear my neighbor making noise. He wasn't loud, and I'm sure he could hear me as well. Because of this, I tried my best to be quiet as possible. Once or twice, I would see him in the elevator, and he tried to make small talk with me. He even asked me over for a drink a few times, assuming I was stressed because of work. I always turned him down. I preferred to be alone after work. One night, while I was talking to my daughter on the phone, I heard the man making a lot of noise in the room. Then, there was a very loud crash in the room that startled me. I first was worried that something happened to the man, but then I heard him walking around in the room, opening the door, and leaving the hotel room. I figured it was all right then. The following day, I didn't hear the man in his room at all. It was pleasant, as he was making noise all the previous days. I slept very well. After work the following day, I didn't hear any noise coming from the room again. It was at this point that I just assumed that the man had checked out. Like me, he had moved into the hotel for work. Perhaps he had been lucky enough to go home early. The following evening, as I was having my dinner, I heard a knock on the door. The police were at the door. They told me that something had happened a couple days ago. I immediately thought about my neighbor. I thought maybe he had hung himself or something. I've heard a lot about lonely businessmen doing this, but then I remembered he had left the hotel room. After they had asked me several questions, they explained to me what had happened, though, and it wasn't at all what I thought it was. Apparently, the man who had lived in the hotel room had invited another man in the hotel over for a drink. He then murdered the man in the room and left the hotel room. They only found the body that morning. They told me this had happened in several hotel rooms over the past year. I believe this was the fourth such incident that occurred exactly like this. They said my description of the man matched the description they had heard given by people in the other hotels. He would stay in a hotel room for a few weeks under different identities. He would invite someone over, kill them, leave them in the room, and leave. He always paid for the room monthly, so the bodies were never found right away. I am very happy I never took him up on his offer to come over for a drink. Number 3. Grandfather's House. Both my grandmother and grandfather lived for a very long time. My grandmother was 91 years old when she passed away. My grandfather was 92. Although they were old, they were able to take care of themselves pretty well. But after my grandmother died, my grandfather's health took a turn towards the worse. My father was going to take time off of work to go and care for him, but that would have been too hard financially on the family. I was supposed to start cram school, but I decided to put it off for a while so I could go and help my grandfather. When I saw my grandfather, I was surprised at how much he had aged since my grandmother had passed on. I suppose that's to be expected, though. I enjoyed being at my grandfather's house because he lived in the country. I often think that this is the reason he and my grandmother had lived for so long. They had a very nice and peaceful home. Although I had always enjoyed being at my grandparents' house, there was a heavy air about the place this time. I figured it was just the negativity in the house concerning the passing of my grandmother, so I put it behind me and tried to help my grandfather out. My grandfather was still quite capable for his age. He could make his way around the house just fine. He could even do chores if he wanted to. I, however, insisted that I do most of the work. My grandfather always went to bed early. Every night, around 1 in the morning, I would wake up as I heard him walking to the bathroom. He would walk to the bathroom. He would be in there for a few minutes, and then walk back to his room. I always waited to hear him walk back to his room before going back to sleep. I needed to make sure he was all right. After about 3 weeks, one night, I heard my grandfather get up and walk to the bathroom. He was in there longer than usual. I didn't hear him walk back to his room. After about 5 minutes, I knew I had to go check on him. I got up and walked over to the bathroom. No one was there. Confused, I went and checked in his room, and he was sound asleep. I figured he probably just went back to the room, and I hadn't heard him. The following day, I asked my grandfather about it. I was surprised to hear him tell me that he had not been getting up that late to go to the bathroom. He always slept through the night until morning. I thought perhaps he was just tired and forgot. That night, I left my bedroom door open so I could see my grandfather in case he got up. As usual, around 1, I heard him get up. I heard the footsteps in the hallway, but I never saw my grandfather walk by my door. I heard the bathroom door open. Confused and a bit scared, I had to figure out what had happened. I got up, and I slowly made my way to the bathroom. The door was open, and I looked inside. A black figure was standing in the bathroom, and I mean, he was black. It was almost like a shadow standing up off the floor. The shadow stood there, and then it began walking towards me. I jumped back, expecting to get hurt, but it didn't hurt me. It didn't even acknowledge me. It simply walked past me, walked down the hallway, and then it was gone. I stood there for a few moments, trying to get over being scared. Then, I suddenly became very concerned about my grandfather. I ran into his room, half expecting to see the shadow in there with him. But he was fine, sleeping soundly and alone. The following night, I heard the steps again. I half expected them to go away. I just remained in my room each time I heard them, and then went and checked on my grandfather afterwards. This carried on for about a month, until, inexplicably, it just stopped. I do not know what it was. If it was the ghost of someone, I did not assume it was my grandmother. But it didn't harm us, and that was what was most important. Konbanwa, Kiro Orange no Neko desu. If you like this story, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the button below, or wait for the one that will appear at the end of this closing. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. Feel free to follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. I really enjoyed these 3 stories. As some of you know, I speak Japanese, although lately I'm more reading and listening to Japanese on TV because I don't have many people to talk to. I spend a lot of time in Japanese forums talking to plenty of people in Japan. I asked for some scary stories on one of the forums, and these were the 3 best I got. All 3 stories were submitted in Japanese and translated by me, which I have to admit I enjoyed doing. I hope you enjoyed them as well. It was a little bit extra work, but I think it was worth it. And as always, remember, Anata no korozeto no naka o mite, Anata no beda no shite o mite kudasai. Anata wa kira o enji no neko ga, doko ni kakurete iro no ka wakarimasen. Oyasumi.